This is Samsung's entry-level A-series mid-ranger, the Galaxy A15. But wait, it's the 5G model. There are two Galaxy A15 models, and this is the one with 5G support. But besides the connectivity, what's the difference? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Galaxy A15 5G review. The entry-level Galaxy phones are usually launched in both a 4G and a 5G version, and the latest Galaxy A15 is no different. On paper, the only real difference between the two versions is the chipset. One of the biggest upgrades for this year's A15s is the switch from an LCD screen to AMOLED. The phone's design is pretty typical for Samsung. The back is made of plastic and has a matte finish instead of the shiny surface of the 4G model. The frame is also plastic with a matching finish, and it curves out around the power and volume keys. The design would have been even better with at least some basic ingress protection though. Like I mentioned, the A15 has an AMOLED display. It's a 6.5-inch panel with a 1080p resolution and a 90Hz refresh rate. The AMOLED tech provides better contrast than an LCD, so we're glad to see Samsung make the change. This display is solid, but pretty basic, without bells and whistles like HDR video support. You do get the 90Hz refresh rate though, which smooths out movements like swiping, but the refresh rate won't dial down automatically when idling to save energy. As far as brightness goes, the A15 5G isn't the brightest around, but it's still decent. We measured a maximum of around 360 nits with a manual brightness slider, and this can boost to nearly 800 nits when in auto mode if needed. You won't get stereo speakers on the A15, just a single bottom firing one. It has very good loudness, but the audio quality is average at best. The focus is on the highs, with passable vocals and no bass. You can wake up and unlock the phone with a fingerprint reader built into the power button on the side. It's fast and reliable. And the A15 5G comes with 128 or 256 gigs of storage, and that is expandable through microSD. The interface of the phone is Samsung's latest One UI 6.0 on top of Android 14. You get pretty much all of the features here, except for an always-on display, DeX, and the Studio Video Editor. And for software support, you get the promise of 3 major Android updates and 4 years of security patches. If you'd like to find out more about One UI 6's specific features, you can check out our dedicated video. Now we get to the chipset. On the 5G model of the A15, you get a MediaTek Dimensity 6100+. That's opposed to the MediaTek Helio G99 inside of the 4G version of the phone. Despite the naming, the chipset is actually the same thing, the only difference being the 5G modem. The processor, the GPU, and the storage options are all the same. Both the A15 5G and the A15 4G have mediocre performance scores that are in line with other phones in the entry-level class. The performance here is decent enough for your everyday tasks. While gaming is possible, the responsiveness leaves more to be desired. What's strange is that even though the chipsets are supposed to be identical, the A15 5G seems to be slower than the 4G one. You can occasionally run into some lag or stutter. Battery life, on the other hand, won't leave you disappointed. With this 5000 mAh battery, the A15 5G scored an excellent active use score of 14 hours and 31 minutes in our tests. It's still not quite as high as the 4G model though, which aced the call time test. The phone supports 25-watt wired charging. With a proper adapter, which isn't included in the box, the A15 was able to charge from 0 to 51% in 30 minutes. A full charge took 83 minutes. On to the cameras. Just like on the 4G model, you get a 50-megapixel main cam, a 5-megapixel ultrawide, and a 2-megapixel macro camera. During the day, the main camera saves good photos, which come out in 12.5 megapixels due to pixel binning. There's no noise, and the dynamic range is wide. The colors are pleasant and mostly accurate. There is enough detail too, however the photos are a bit over-sharpened, and sometimes this is masked with some sort of artificial smoothing. At night, the main camera produces poor photos by default. They're low in detail and have a lot of smeared noise. The dynamic range is narrow too. If you turn on the dedicated night mode though, the results are much improved. The night mode photos have much more detail and wider dynamic range. The colors look good as well. You can record video from the main cam in 1080p resolution. The videos are detailed, with realistic colors, good dynamic range, and no visible noise. The rendition looks somewhat overprocessed though. There is support for electronic video stabilization here. That's something which you don't get on the 4G model for some reason. Even during the day, the 5-megapixel ultrawide camera produces poor photos, almost unusable. While they do have great dynamic range and likable colors, they're incredibly poor in detail, and sometimes noisy too. As you'd expect, the ultrawide's nighttime photos are poor as well. They're dark and noisy, with super narrow dynamic range, and of course, they're low on detail. And there's no night mode to turn things around either. The ultrawide camera's videos aren't good, but they are usable if you need to fit a lot in the frame and you don't care about the quality. The 2-megapixel macro camera captures mediocre photos, with the amount of detail you'd expect at this resolution. Finally, the 13-megapixel selfies are solid. They're detailed, with low enough noise, adequate dynamic range, and realistic colors. So there you have it, the Galaxy A15 5G. For an entry-level phone, it has plenty to offer, including great battery life and this year's new AMOLED display. It's a decent choice if you need 5G connectivity at a low price. However, the 4G model did feel faster and more responsive, and it's also cheaper. So if you don't need 5G, better go for the A15 4G instead. Thanks for watching, guys. If you need it, here's a link to our Galaxy A15 4G review. And another alternative could be the Poco M6 Pro 4G. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.